thank you all for coming. It's so good. Some of you I haven't seen for quite a while. It's really heartwarming to get us together like this and share good memories. I have a few announcements while I have your captive attention, so I can't give it to Tom yet until you listen to what I have to say. So first of all, I'm hoping that each of you will leave with one of these today. It tells about what's happening in November. Lots of fun programs. We're veering away from history for just a couple months. In November, we're doing a craft program for a Christmas present idea. You can make your own calendars with our famous Susan Johns. You bring your pictures or your drawings or whatever. We'll supply the materials, and you'll have a 2013 calendar that you can give to someone. Also, we have our famous Friends book sale coming up in the middle of the month for 2 days, and the bank room over there has all been remodeled nicely. Things have been moved around. It's really, really nice. You won't want to miss that. In December, we have, of course, our silver tea, and then a couple of jewelry making sessions that you could come and make some more Christmas presents. And then in January, back to history. A very special month for me because my 90-year-old mother is going to come and share her experiences teaching school in a Japanese internment camp, Camp Amachi. So that's going to be fun, the end of January. That's going to tie in with our Whatcom County One Book Reads event. And then in February, Mr. Perry is going to come back and share some more fascinating information. Up here afterwards, when you're done with the program, if you'd like to linger and look at some things, just this last week, coincidentally, I unearthed Jim Berg's, see the official title here, Original Nooksack City Settlers. Some of you may be familiar with this. He did a lot of research on this about 15 years ago. Would love to hear comments. You might want to page through this, see what you see. And we also have Larry Mady's original photo album here from which these pictures came. Oh, last but not least, our friends brochures. You too could become one of our friends for a lifetime membership of just $5. There's our friend's president making her way to the back seat there. You can be kept abreast of these programs and just help support this wonderful library. $5 lifetime membership, what a deal. There you go. I'm going to turn this over to Tom.
Just a couple of announcements just before. I was going to say that if anything comes up today that creates some interest or a question or this and that, the library right here is a great wealth of resource material to thumb through and look through. In our presence, Eileen already mentioned that Larry Mady's. How about standing up, Larry? He's the one responsible for all the pictures here in at City Hall. Jim Berg is another gentleman. Stand up, Jim. Has extensive knowledge on anything to do with the area and in Nooksack. The City Hall in Nooksack has minutes, ordinances, and resolutions dating from day one, which is December 6th, 1912. That's our centennial date. And Larry Mady's collection of photos on the wall display there also. So it is another source. If you make arrangements, you can examine this stuff. If there's something in particular you're looking for, you want to see. I can help you out with anything to do as far as with the cemetery. If you've got any question on who's there or where they are, I can help you with that. I don't see him, but I thought Carl Kraus is going to be here, and I'm just going to say the Advent campground and the Advent church is a story unto itself, and Carl Kraus has a wealth of knowledge and information and pictures on that. At our centennial celebration on September 8th, we had a memorabilia scattered around on a table at City Hall, and Carl had a presentation from the campground and the church there, and it probably occupied most of the people coming through and looking and creating stories and talking. So I would defer anything about campground and Advent Church to Carl Kraus. The little brochure that was put out said Tom Jones, da-da-da-da-da-da. One of the little things was longtime resident. And I just wanted to say, how did I get to be a longtime resident? It all began when my mother's parents moved to Nooksack in the late 1920s. There has been a presence in town from that original group that moved there in the late 20s till present. And I thought I was going to have some representation of the fifth generation that is still in town, but I don't see them yet. If they show up later, I'll introduce them. So we have had a presence in town from that family since the late 20s. There are people here today that have roots going farther back than the 20s, much farther back. But I don't know that anybody can claim 5 generations still in town. I'm just right in the city limits. Now, it could be in the area, but living in the city limits of town, if anybody's got 5th generation, I would like to know who they are. Compare notes. The other thing, when we had the celebration at NOOKSACC for our centennial in September, we lucked out and got a beautiful day. But that presentation there tried to cover from the beginning through many decades and to the end. And when I was going to do this, I decided to not take that biblical approach to it as in the beginning and this much later, amen. So I took a little window, a little piece of time, and just to look at that and see what was going on in town. And I chose the fall of the year of 1915, 16, and 17. And that's just after the city's been underway for a couple, 3 years of getting the kinks worked out. They know what they're kind of trying to accomplish. And World War I has not gobbled up everything yet. So it's kind of, I don't want to say a time of innocence, but it's still kind of quiet. It's not real crazy, and there's a lot of similarities to what's going on today, and hopefully we'll pull this out and see what our comparisons are. So since it's election time, I thought we'd start off with what was the political atmosphere in town. And this is kind of your picture of your downtown area, and I was going to start off with the editorial. And at this time, the NOOKSACC Reporter is located in the building right in here. So right here on Front Street, the NOOKSACC Reporter's there, and Mrs. Harry Olin is the editor, and her husband Harry is the city clerk here in 1916. And her editorial at October endorses a straight Republican ticket from the president through the state down to the county commissioners. It is a straight Republican ticket, and she endorses also a no vote on 2 state bills that would allow intoxicants to be sold. So basically NOOKSACC is dry. And the 2 things that came out of this was, here Mrs. Olin in her editorial is stating what she thinks people ought to vote for. But you got to remember, women don't vote. She's telling the men of the community, the registered men of the community, to vote. Women don't vote. And on the no issue on the state drinking ballots, last year we still had liquor involved in the state ballot. The state said they were getting out of it. This year we have another issue. Should marijuana be legalized or not? So maybe the names change and the dates change, but these moral and civic issues kind of just come around and come around and come around. But the no votes on those 2 initiatives from the state were rejected. They did not pass. And in this 1915, 16, 17 era, there is an organization, and it's powerful in NOOKSACC, and it's the WCTU, the Women's Christian Temperance Union. These ladies don't vote, but I guarantee you they have more power than any other organization at the local, grassroots, national political level. And they are in NOOKSACC, and they meet quite regularly. Politically, so there's where the paper stands, Mrs. Olin stands, and what the issues of drinking and voting are up. Business on Main Street in this era. S.G. Mathers has men's wool union suits for $3. At the store, you can buy a 3-pound can of Reliance coffee for $1. The NOOKSACC Reporter, the newspaper office, has poison fly paper for sale. And not just sticky fly paper, it's poisoned. NOOKSACC Cannery is in need of all varieties of apples, and they will take delivery on Tuesdays and Fridays. Call S.G. Mather. I don't know what he had to do with the cannery, just maybe because he was downtown in his store, he helped coordinate delivery at the cannery. There is a picture that Barb Burke brought in during our celebration that shows workers at this cannery. It doesn't show the building so much, but this thing was located at the north end of the park. And I would guess, I'm only surmising, I would just guess that the back door of this cannery is right next to the slough. So where all the pits and the cores and the peelings and everything got dumped out that back door, they probably fell into the slough. Goshen Lumber Company has all your building needs. With the NOOKSACK Merc, you can see up there on the corner, their ad for that day was, you can buy Munsing wear, clothing that will fit you like a clear conscience. Now that had to be good feeling clothes. Also, Miller Auto Tires, guaranteed for 5,000 miles. So that store up there, it ceased to exist, maintained that reputation. If you couldn't find it at the NOOKSACK Merc, it did not exist. Also is a picture of the vehicle here. And it was encouraged to shop local just as it is today. But if you did have to take a trip, if you did have to leave town to find something or go somewhere, here's the stage, and that is owned by the Sear brothers. They had 3 round trips daily, leaving at 8 a.m. in the morning, 1 in the afternoon, and 5 p.m., and returns later on. And also, another mode of transportation that is coming into play at this time is also the motor car. As reference to Mr. and Mrs. S.G. Mather and daughter Alice visited the J.J. Ross home in Cedar Woolley. The trip was made by motor car. But if you couldn't find what you wanted here, and the stage didn't run when you wanted to, and didn't own a car, the main source of transportation, the transportation hub in town, is there. You went over to the train depot, you got a ticket, you could go north, south, or east to any points. So by far and away, this is still the primary source of transportation in and out. And during our celebration last September, 2 gentlemen came in and mentioned to me, and they're probably in their 80s, that their fathers as young men arrived in NOOKSACK, got off the train, and stood there with a couple of bucks in their pocket and walked away to their futures. That building stood there till the early 1940s. It was disassembled, and lumber from that building was used to construct another building that is still standing in NOOKSACK. This one. It is the last building on the west side of the road, leaving town to the north, about across from the Assembly of God Church. It's standing in a little grove of trees, then the field, then the Tom Road. If you want any more information on that, talk to Chuck Robinson or Barb Burke. They have a personal connection to that building and know more about it than I do. But it is still standing. It is reconstructed from that lumber out of that depot. Like I said, this thing is long gone before my time. But I do have a very indirect connection to it. Over here, across the railroad tracks, in what is now a stand of blackberries and tall grass, every spring a crop of narcissus come up. And it's always my assumption, I can't prove it, no record, but my assumption was that some station master or someone who lived in that building afterwards probably planted these bulbs many years ago. So, and I would like to say, for the last 55 years, but I can't guarantee it, so I'll just say many, many years. And I would like to say every year, and I can't guarantee that, so I'll say for most years, our family has gone over there and picked a bouquet of these narcissus. And this is our 2012 crop from that little spot across from the depot where it stood years ago. So, business community is going along very well. And this is 1915, but by 1917, the Sear brothers sold their stage. And it was, the article in the paper stated, during the 4 years the Sear brothers have been in the business, they have built up a lucrative trade, and by their genial and accommodating ways have won for themselves many friends. They will still maintain their garage and machine shop at Everson. Phone, Maine 52. Also, the fall of that year, Mr. and Mrs. O sold the reporter to H.E. Stewart of Linden, and he took over the newspaper in November of 1917. So you can see things are buying and selling and trading, and things on Front Street are moving right along. Socially, everything that happened, if it didn't happen at the church and it didn't happen at school, it happened right up here. That is Mather Hall. It is the space above the building that this is used for everything. And just an example, here in the fall of 1915, a birthday party was held at Mather Hall to honor Miss Tucker on her 16th birthday, and there were 27 in attendance. Well, this is where you're going to do something. It's going to happen there. Another interesting social event that took place was in October 17, and it has a couple of interesting notes in the article. On Tuesday, October 16th at 12 o'clock noon, Miss Annie Schroeder, daughter of Mr. and Mrs. Henry Schroeder, and Mr. Harry Nash, son of H.M. Nash, were married at Seattle by the Reverend Dr. Powers. The contracting parties are well known to Nooksack people. The bride being a native daughter, she was a member of the graduating class from Nooksack High School, 1915. Since that time, she has been the chief operator for the Farmers Mutual Telephone Company. Mr. and Mrs. Nash will make their home in Seattle, where Mr. Nash is working in the shipyards. The interesting part of that is, Mrs. Olin, just before she sold the paper, she's using the word contracting parties as to describe an engaged couple getting married. And I said, boy, what have we got on the ballot this fall? Don't we have something about marriage and contract and definition and wording? I'm not quite sure in 1917 how she worded this contracting parties to describe them, but she did. That was the word she used. And the other thing is, Miss Annie was the telephone operator for 2 years. Now, this young lady is leaving town with 2 years of information. Anybody who worked as a telephone operator knew everything. Everything went through those people. So here she's leaving, and I assume since she got a nice write in the paper, she must have been a trustworthy operator. She didn't divulge too many things, but knew just enough. So I suppose there was just a bit of trepidation on who they were going to hire as the new operator to take her place. Also, up here in Mather Hall, not only all the social events took place in town, but all organizations were meeting. And some of the organizations in town that era are the Nooksack Homestead. They meet the second and fourth Tuesday of each month. William McGrath, President, Bourne Bay, Secretary. Nooksack number 9469 of the Modern Woodsmen of America meets second and last Wednesdays of each month in Mather's Hall. Fred Metcalf, VC, and S.G. Mather, Clerk. Nooksack Lodge number 192 of the Free and Accepted Masons meet Mather's Hall, second and fourth Monday nights of each month. Brethren cordially invited. John Simpson, W. and S.G. Mather, Secretary. So he pretty well has the hall booked up with organizations and social events. And I picked out a couple of interesting things from the churches also. I didn't go in great detail looking at the Advent Church, like I stated. That and the campgrounds is such a vast volume of things, and Carl could do a way better job, and Jim Berg could do a way better job on those issues. But I did find a couple of notices that was going on in the Methodist Church, and that is the church, and just out of this time frame, that church hasn't always sat there, but in this time frame, that's where the church is and still there today. I originally was going to use a different picture that showed the church at one end of the block and the school at the other end of the block to demonstrate something, but it didn't work out that way. But anyway, at the Methodist Church and the Advent Christian Church, Sunday schools at 10 and preaching services at 11. Both are offering 10 and 11 o'clock services. And at the Methodist Church on Friday night, October 20th, 1916, everyone is expected to be here to hear the Reverend Polton from Sumas to speak. After, a free box social to follow. Every woman and girl bring a box. If you've been involved in any kind of a reception for this or that and it's not RSVP, you always kind of wonder how many people can I get to bring something, and will we have too much or not enough. for the life of me, I don't know how box socials were ever planned. How would you know who was bringing your box or how many people are coming? It just must have been a grabble. I don't know how that could work out, but somebody worried about it and it wasn't me, thank goodness. But anyway, if the women and girls brought enough box socials and there were enough people there to listen, it must have all worked out. Later on, the Methodist Church, Tuesday evening, November 13th at 8 p.m., all are welcome and admission free to hear George W. Morrow of Michigan, famous orator and lecturer, to speak on national prohibition. So not only the WCTU, but both churches are fighting the effects of alcohol in the community, and they're way ahead of the game in Nooksack. It stayed dry till 1980s, I think. So we got two churches that are very busy doing lots of things. Back to the city, December 6, 1912 was the incorporation date. The community itself had been around since the 1880s. Finally got the paperwork done. Now they're an official city. So I let them struggle for the first couple of years. I didn't want to talk about. One of the first notes was the elected city council went over to Linden to see how they did things. So we give them a couple of years to get things going and figure things out and what they're going to do. So an interesting thing is, fall of 1915, the city called for sealed bids to remove trees, stumps, and roots to either be burned or removed, grade and gravel a portion of East Madison Street, and that's the part of the street from the railroad tracks like you're going up towards the cemetery. And they rejected all the first round of bids. They threw them all out. And they didn't say why they threw them out. They just said they all were rejected and called for a second round of bids. And on the second round of bids, R.H. Pearl was awarded the bid for $99.90. Right now, the city is looking at rebuilding East Madison once again, and engineers' reports are in excess of $255,000 to do this little job. Now, we're working on the same street 90-some years later, and yes, the price has gone up. So there's always that thing, maybe we ought to do it today and not tomorrow. It could be more expensive. Well, certainly 95 years made it go up. The next year, in the fall of 1916 in October, city passed a resolution for the building of a sidewalk. And this sidewalk was to begin down here at the Columbia Street by Starvin' Sam's, go all the way up to Hayes Street by the Assembly of God Church, jump over and finish out up the Tom Road. You had a choice. They passed this resolution. The sidewalk was to be either made of either gravel or coal cinders. And the budding property owners, anybody who had property facing this proposed route, had 60 days in which to come in, pick up the specifications on how the sidewalk was to be built, and build it. So the property owner was to build the sidewalk in front of his house. I didn't follow this up to see how well that worked, but there was a penalty attached to it. It said if you didn't complete this project in 60 days, the city would come in, do your sidewalk in various place, and assess the expense to your property. I didn't follow this up to see if that really worked or not. It said it was a resolution, and resolutions don't really pack the power of law, so I'm guessing that was a good plan that probably didn't work. But there are more humorous sidewalk stories in Nooksack, and if anybody afterwards has got any curiosity about sidewalks, I can tell you about them. So at this time, they got a couple years under their way. They know what they're doing, and they have the budget, which the cities are working on at this time of year. And in the fall of 1917, this budget was passed. This budget has 8 line items in it. Salaries, $72. Street lights and fuel, $20. Incidentals, $100. Printing, $25. Repairs, $100. Streets and bridges, $403. Sidewalks, $100, and elections, $15, for a grand total of $835 to run the city that year. There are 3 sources on the income side to offset that. $50 were going to come from fines and tickets, maybe, if they caught somebody doing something bad. Another $50 was going to come from license sales, dog license, peddler's permits, business permits, for another $50. But $735 was going to be the property tax. That's what was the main bulk of it. So 3 sources of income for $835 to balance that budget. One thing did crop up, though. The next year's budget was the exact same number, $835, but they made a major shift. So I thought, well, maybe the first one was a typo or a typesetting error or something was wrong, or there was a major shift. Because the next year, instead of salaries being $72, it was $172. And bridges and streets and sidewalks, instead of $403, was $303. So if it wasn't a mistake, or if it was one way or the other, then there's this disturbing idea that maybe politicians are upping their wages and things are not, who knows. But there was a $100 shift from streets to wages. And also, digging around in the budget at that time, periodically there would come up a need for legal representation, and they had hired R.S. Lambert of Sumas to handle their legal problems. And R.S. Lambert was one of the founders of the Lone Jack Mine. He was a lawyer in Sumas, and he also was elected to the House of Representatives here in Olympia. But I suspect when he is working in NOOKSACK on our legal issues, he never would have dreamt that his great niece would someday be assistant city clerk, Mary Lou Jones. That's my one plug. So the original picture I was going to use was going to show the school in the church in the background, but it didn't work out, so I ended up using this picture of the school, and this is just a little earlier version of the time frame I'm working in. But there is a picture on that loop that was going by. It showed the remodeling where there is twin peaks in the front of it. It's been expanded, it's grown. But anyway, what is the school doing in the falls of the year? In 1915, Miss Beth Tanner and Miss Grace Allen, teachers at the high school, were surprised with a vegetable shower by the senior class. And I'm only guessing that these vegetables supplemented their meager wages. I'm hoping that they got a lot of good stuff. A bonfire party was held at Lloyd Pike's Tuesday evening for the teachers. That was a nice social event. Everybody gathered there, the teachers and this and that. One thing different, though, today there is no outside burning in cities, so no more bonfires. In the fall of 1916, a year later, there are 25 incoming freshmen in the class. And the school paper also put up a little article, and also Mrs. Olin at the Reporter would also reprint the school paper in a section of the NOOKSACK Reporter. So not only did the school kids get the paper out there, it was also put out in the general circulation in the newspaper. So these things are read by everyone. And this notice was put out: gym construction is not progressing as hoped. 25 men and boys with tools are wanted to work October 21st. Dinner will be served in the domestic science department by the high school girls. So if guys, you got a hammer and saw, show up, and the high school girls will feed you if you'll help work on the gym. The school board is having a coal shed erected. The work is being done by Mr. Bangle. The coal shed will be a great improvement over the wood piles. Coal is a pretty hot button issue right now, so we'll just let that one slide on by. It's appropriate, but it is kind of funny. But in the high school paper, they published out what is they called high school student rules. Trim fingernails out of school. Keep feet out of the aisle. Keep gum out of mouth. Keep pins out of pencil ends. I don't know. You suppose that was some kind of a poking tool or something? Keep rubber snappers out of hands. Keep attention focused on the teacher. And don't indulge in daydreaming. Now this next one is really contrasting to this era to what we have today. Girls that come to school from a distance are urged to not join the physical training class. So the assumption is if you were a girl and you'd walk some distance to school, that's it. Don't do it anymore. Right this past weekend, if you would have went up to high school, you would have seen so many girls involved in soccer, in volleyball, and in PE, and in cross country. It's just a total reversal of that era, that mentality. There is one big difference. Published in the Courier, the school paper that year, they are showing what their editorial staff is. And the editorial staff here in the fall of 1917, Editor-in-Chief, Oliver Ingersoll. Literary, Grace McElhoe. Society, Florence Schroeder. Sports, Lynn Bailey. And General Notes, Esther Annis. It will be the aim of this staff to present to the friends and patrons of the school through the Courier our proceedings, accomplishments, and undertakings. To readers, if at any time this paper seems partisan to a certain class, remember that the editorial staff is made up of an editor from each class, and each editor has the same chance of joking another class. So, Jim, did you ever know your dad was the sports editor of the paper? Oh, we'll keep going. Also that fall, the class officers were freshman class, O.K. Pike, president. Juanita Wright, secretary and treasurer, and Miss Bevins, class teacher. Sophomores, Lawrence Wright, president. Edward Robinson, secretary. Percy Tilbury, treasurer. Miss Robinson, class teacher. For the junior class, president. Wade Bristol, Adina Clander, secretary treasurer, and Mr. Turnbull, class teacher. For the seniors, Ray Schultz, president. Arthur Cloud, secretary treasurer, and Miss Allen, class teacher. Then we turn to who are the ASB president, the student body people themselves in 1917. Officers of the student body are as follow. Lynn Bailey, president. Did you know he was ASB president? Wade Bristol, secretary treasurer, and this is a little different. Lawrence Wright, yell leader. All of the above named officers have had experience along these lines and will be able to fill their office efficiently and well. If you remember here just the year before, we had to call the boys out with their tools to get the gym progressing. Now here in the fall of 1917, we have another little problem. The problem being the gym floor had not been laid yet, and it was only about 3/4 put down. And they put a call out again to people, if you want to play basketball this fall, and we got a schedule, you're going to have to get in here and get that rest of that floor down. So there was a hustle and a bustle, and everybody showed up, and they got the rest of that hardwood floor down, and they're ready to go. And this was what happened on the initiation of the gym. On Wednesday at 3 o'clock, the new gym was initiated. A short program was held, beginning with Singing of America and the Pledge of Allegiance. Each student in the 7th and 8th grade and high school had his or her name in a box. One of the smaller children was chosen to draw the names. The one whose name was drawn was to have the first try at making the first basket in the new gym. Ruth Pike was the first one drawn. The seniors expected to see her win, but the excitement was too much for her, and she failed. Next came Charlie Olson and Letha Richmond, each one failing. Lawrence Wright was the next one chosen. He walked up to the foul line, took the ball, threw it, and it dropped right through the basket. Lawrence has the distinction of throwing the first basket in the new gym. And after that, he said, real basket tossing started as the boys started to turn out immediately. Going on at the same time in the fall as sports is, I think, probably something that's probably more exciting than even basketball. But they did publish their basketball schedule, and it is a home and home with 4 other teams. Sumas at Sumas, Birch Bay at Nooksack, Harmony at Nooksack, and Linden at Nooksack. And then the order was reversed. And this season stretched from November 23rd through February 15th, and it's not uncharacteristic of the schedule now, except we play closer to 20-plus games in that same amount of time versus 8. Also going on at this time is a tryout for the debating team. And the 3 winners were Enide Smith, Lynn Bailey, and Oliver Ingersoll. Nooksack's first debate takes place November 8th when she debates the Fairhaven High. May Nooksack be victorious. And just to follow up, a week later, the Nooksack Fairhaven debate takes place tonight at Fairhaven. Quite a number of Nooksack students are planning to attend it. School yells and songs are being practiced for the debate. Debaters Smith, Bailey, and Ingersoll are thoroughly and efficiently preparing to meet the Fairhaven trio in a great oratorical and argumentative debate. Nooksack has great hopes of becoming the victor. So it sounds to me like the debate team has got the yell leaders, they got the stuff, they got what's going on. And at that year, just to try to make a rough comparison again to what's going on today, the school budget that was put out for that fall of 17 reads, and again, it only has 8 lines in it. It's so simple. I was going to say previously on the Nooksack budget of $865, $835 with 8 lines. Today's budget that City Clerk Virginia Ratter is working on has 300 lines in it, and it takes $1.7 million to balance it. It's not comparing apples to apples, that's for sure, but nevertheless, to run the city then on 830 or 865, today $1.7 million. It's a little bit of a difference. The school was no different. Expense, general control, $135. The expense of instruction, $6,445. Expense of operation, $875. Maintenance, $400. Auxiliary agency, and I don't know what that is, $75. Payment of outstanding warrants, $534.02. Additions to the buildings, $50. And equipment for the buildings, $200. For a grand total of $8,684.02. Again, trying to make one of those comparisons to what's going on today. That was the Nooksack School District before consolidation. Assuming that Sumas had a budget similar, Everson had a budget similar. So if you took the school Nooksack Valley budget of today and divided it maybe by a third, $5 or $6 million, Steve? Again, it's not apples to apples, but it just kind of shows you, again, what has changed in the last 95 years. Here we are in the fall of 1917, and things are starting to change. And you can just see the reportings of what is starting to happen and how things are changing. This week, Mr. Banfield distributed food preservation pledge cards to the pupils. The cards are to be signed by the mothers of the pupils, as they are the ones that do the food economizing trick. Every woman should sign these pledges and so do her bit towards downing the Kaiser. Last Tuesday evening, the Nooksack School held a bonfire Liberty Loan Bond rally at the school grounds and auditorium to interest people in buying of bonds. The rally was well attended. The main speakers of the evening were Reverend Schultz, O.P. Brown, and Reverend Shuddock. The 2 reverends were from the Methodist and Advent Church. You see, we're starting to try to do some economizing in the food, selling of bonds. Another indicator that things are changing. Corporal A.W. Orr visited home folks on Friday of the last week. Corporal Wade Bailey was home from Fort Casey to spend the weekend with the home folks. Private P.F. Tucker was home from Camp Lewis for a short visit with the folks this weekend. So you can see now in 17, we're leaving this era. Comings and goings have to do with young gentlemen in the service, economizing and selling of bonds. Things are changing. And that's just about where I decided to make the cut. But the one thing I kind of discovered going through all this stuff, there was one gentleman in town during this era that was just Mr. Prominent. That is Mr. S.G. Mather. Samuel Grant. He was born in 1866 and died in 1937. And he's and his wife buried up here in the cemetery. He is mayor from 1915 to 19. He's the second mayor of Nooksack. As mentioned in those lodge meetings, he is involved with the Masons and the Woodmen of America. He originally had a wooden building, but burned in those fires in 1906, and he built this brick building. He had a retail store here, S.G. Mather's store is right in there. The upstairs was the social hub of the city. And again, he died in 1937, so I had no connection with him. But right here is his daughter, Alice. Now, I didn't know her as Alice Mathers. I knew her as Mrs. Coghill. I don't know, I'm sure most people here probably ran into Mrs. Alice Coghill. So you got to know that this little girl right here on Front Street in Nooksack, her dad's the mayor, he runs one of the prominent businesses, she's probably in and out of there. This little gal is probably, conceivably, the princess of Nooksack. I don't know, but I know the Mrs. Alice Coghill I knew didn't ever strike that impression with me. She started her career as an elementary teacher down here and then transferred later to the high school where she was librarian and study hall. That lady knew how to keep a study hall quiet. She was born in 1910 and died in 2002, and she's buried up here at the cemetery. I wouldn't call it humorous, but I do have some anecdotes about her end-of-life experience. She stayed up here on the S-curve where she lived with her husband until I think when she retired, and shortly after retirement, her and Burl moved to Skagit County, maybe Burlington or something, to be closer to one of their sons. But when she left a large collection of newspapers to the city, and for most of this is where I got most of my stuff. So maybe I was noisy and fidgety in study hall, but she's got to appreciate the fact that I did take her stuff, and I did apply myself, kept quiet, and got it done. And that is that building in June of 1979, just before it was taken down. And you can see up here, that would have been an outside stairwell leading up to the upper hall where all the social events took. You can see all the various little back doors to all the little businesses that were on Front Street. And this was taken from the alley, kind of by City Hall, looking across the alley over to the back of it. And when it finally came down there in 1979, I can tell you the only thing that building was good for, it housed probably 10 million starlings. And that's the only thing that was in that building when it came down. So when Alice moved away and this building came down, that was the end of the Mather influence in town. And that building stood, it was built in 1910 to 79, so it had about a 70-year run before it was over. But it's hard to believe that somebody who was that prominent, and now nobody would know unless they went digging back that they ever had that big of a role to play. So with that, if there's any questions, I would like to try to answer them for you or direct you to them, or if not, just turn the lights on.
What was the population in 1917?
I didn't check the census report, so I don't know. But I would guess probably from, I don't know, Jim, would you make a rough guess on the number when you went through the houses and the property owners and all of this and that?
Well, when they had to have 300 people to become a city.
Okay.
So they had 312.
So
I guess it's 350 maybe.
I would guess.
Didn't the sign say 323 and
Well, that's not that you can't shrink.
Slow growth.
And now we're right around 1,300, so we're up again.
Now, I have a question
Okay.
for you. What happened to Everson?
Uh,
All I heard you talk about was NOOKSACK.
that's all I was supposed to talk about.
Well, I looked at your flyer and said Everson. Being a curious fellow, that's why I'm here anyhow. I just moved here to the state.